Good afternoon. It's actually like 1 minute past 12, so it's the afternoon. I am so excited all these people showed up. You're very hearty souls for coming out on this kind of nasty day. So my name is Sarah Ripp. I'm the Outreach Coordinator and Undergrad Advisor for the Latin American, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies program. And I'm just going to make a couple of quick announcements before I turn it over to our Associate Director, who's going to introduce our panel today. Tonight, actually, we are co-sponsoring a Peace Corps kickoff event that's happening at the University Club. It's from 4 o'clock till 6 o'clock, and it's a free event. There'll be food and tables set up, lots of information about the Peace Corps. And actually, these folks here are going to be our keynote speakers tonight, speaking about some other aspects of Colombia.
Tonight?
Tonight.
You say 4 to 6?
Yep, the University.
Night.
What's that? What's
4
that?
to 6, you said.
4 to 6 tonight,
You call
yep.
that night?
This afternoon from 4 to 6,
Oh, I see.
yes. Okay, next week, our lunchtime lecture on Tuesday at noon, same time, same place. It's going to be pretty unusual. We're having a talk called Ancient Looms, Modern Threads, Contemporary Hand-Woven Garments of Oaxaca, Mexico. And it's a grad student from Design Studies. She is going to come and talk to us about the ancient art of weaving on a loom, but she's actually bringing in mini looms where people can even try them out. So it should be kind of an interactive presentation. Also that same day, I'm fast forwarding 2 weeks, March 15th, we have 2 talks coming up that might be of interest. In the evening at 5:30, we're co-sponsoring a talk with the Madison Committee on Foreign Relations called The Evolving Crisis in Venezuela. That's at 5:30 p.m. at the Madison Club. There's handouts about all of this up in the corner, so if you want to check that out. Also on Tuesday the 15th, our lunchtime lecture happening here, again, same time, same place. We're very fortunate to have a documentary filmmaker, author Karen Mueller, who maybe some of you have seen her before. She comes usually once a year to do these travel adventure series programs with the Wisconsin Union. She gave one on Cuba a year ago, and she's back to give one on Egypt in a couple of weeks. And normally she presents to very large crowds, but I asked if she'd come and give a lecture to our smaller venue, and she said yes. So hopefully some of you can join us. So I'll turn it over to Alberto. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Alberto Vargas, the Associate Director of LASIS, and I welcome all of you, and it's my pleasure to introduce our panel. I'll be brief. We have Jack Lown is the president of the Colombia Support Network. It's an organization founded in 1987 with Cecilia Zarate. Jack has degrees in law from Harvard and Stanford and a master's in Latin American history. He was a Peace Corps volunteer in Panama. Cecilia, here to my left, originally from Santander in Colombia, is the program director of Colombia Support Network. She has degrees in nutrition, a master's degree from University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, and she also has served in the board of the American Friends Service Committee and also the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Carlos Arenas, here to my left too, he's been here before. He has degrees in law from Universidad Nacional de Colombia and a master's in legal institutions from UW-Madison. Currently, he works in Displacement Solutions, NGO working on climate change impacts. He has also been a researcher for ILSA, Instituto Latinoamericano por un Derecho y Sociedad Alternativa, and former director of Working Capital for Community Needs. Eunice Gibson, here on my right, she graduated from UW Law School, and she served as City of Madison as Assistant City Attorney, and also as the City Attorney from 1991 for 2002. After her retirement, she is on the board of the Colombia Support Network and has traveled with the Colombia Support Network to Colombia several times and also to other sister cities from Madison, like Camagüey and Aracatao. And she is also a member of the World Jurist Association and the Inter-American Bar Association. So we welcome them to talk to us about the peace process in Colombia, very important topic, the Transitional Justice Promise. One other announcement, this Friday, we're hosting the film festival at the Cinematheque at 7 p.m. The Mexican series. What's the movie, Ed? This
Yeah,
Friday?
fantastic.
The title of the movie, you know? This Friday?
I think the Monster with 100 Heads.
Monster with 100 Heads. All right. Well, I left the panel with you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Alberto. I have the commitment to start this panel, and it's the most difficult part because there are 4 people, and I have to be really short not to take the time. But before I go, I want to invite people, particularly women, I will pass this around, to support this initiative for peace in Colombia, for Women's Initiative for Peace in Colombia. And I will pass this around so you can take it. And there is some reading material, copies of our newsletters, and another invitation for a delegation that we are planning to go in April. So feel free to take material from there. With that, I will start my presentation. I am going to make like a general introduction to Colombia, and then the panelists, the rest of them, will focus on specifically the transitional justice. Colombia is a country that has a population of 48 million people, and is a democracy that fulfills the requisites, at least in theory. Elections every 4 years, the 3 branches of government, membership of the United Nations and the Organization of American States, is a signer of all kinds of international agreements and treaties on human rights, women's rights, children's rights, environment, etc. It has had mostly civilian governments and no military dictatorships. There is a non-written agreement for the civilian government basically to handle the economy and foreign policy. But they give the military carte blanche to repress and control. This unwritten agreement has made Colombia a unique case in Latin America for not having military dictatorships and presenting a facade of democracy. Because the military don't need to take power, they have all the power they want without the need to take it. But the main characteristic of this democracy is exclusion, which in itself is a contradiction of what democracy is about. This is a key element to understand Colombia. It excludes the majority of its population from their social, political, economic, and human rights. According to the Index of Human Development, Colombia is number 98 among 168 nations in the world. The Gini that measures inequality from 0 to 1, being 1 an extreme inequality, is 0.54, and the Gini index in rural areas reaches 0.88. These inequalities are the origin of the conflict, particularly access to land. There is a tendency to concentrate lands and use them for cattle raising, causing, besides environmental consequences. Most of the conflict of the 20th and 21st centuries are for agrarian reasons, such as coffee growing, coca production, and the intention of big multinational corporations to produce agro-export products such as oil palm or sugar cane to produce biofuel. The result is a humanitarian crisis because it affects the fundamental rights of the campesinos. Around 6.6 million hectares were taken with violence in the last decades. Development is seen as help in credit to big landowners. The government discusses in Havana reforms in the countryside that's supposed to contribute to peace. But at the same time, it's promoting a law called CIDRES, Zonas of Interest and Economic and Social Rural Development, which is an instrument that would legalize the accumulation of land, especially uncultivated land, to be given to national and foreign businesses in order to develop their projects. There is a previous law which says that preferences should be given to landless peasants in territories with uncultivated land. The government proposes alliances with peasants who will end up hired by foreign companies. In reality, this law legalizes the illegal accumulation of empty lands by big monopolies, such as Cargill from Minnesota, that in practice will transform campesinos and small businessmen into modern servants. In Havana, the government refuses to negotiate the neoliberal agenda. A warning should be made to this type of projects because the land issue, which originated the long war in the beginning, is not being really solved. The United States military aid and intervention is another worrisome issue, given the fact that Plan Colombia inclined the balance of the war in favor of the state because it strengthened the army, the police, and the Air Force. It was sold to the US public as an anti-drug strategy, but in reality, in practice, it was a counterinsurgency strategy. There were $10 billion invested to weaken the FARC, using all kinds of methods, including presenting them as simple narco-terrorists without mentioning their political origins. The CIA, the Pentagon, and the intelligence agencies played an important role in this project. The use of sophisticated technology, such as smart bombs, which are able to kill a person in the dense rainforest if he is located in an exact place. The United States has declared that military aid will continue after peace is signed. Also, is well known the participation of Israeli advisors. On March 1986, 30 years ago, the Colombian government ratified a peace agreement signed with the FARC and approved the creation of a party called Unión Patriótica. This was a challenge to the then exclusionary system of two political parties, liberals and conservatives. The government decided to take the challenge to give the new party the same freedoms, guarantees, and security granted to the other two parties. On March 9, the new party participated in elections and got 5 senators, 9 representatives, 14 state representatives, and 351 council members. On the list, there were not only former militants of the FARC, but many people who joined the new party because they were unhappy with the way the two traditional parties behaved, often acting as a single party with two names, taking the same positions on political and economic policies. The government rejoiced with the result of the elections and pointed out that they were the result of a collective construction of the peace agreement. A month later, the assassinations began. 2 presidential candidates of the new party, 5 parliamentarians, and many city council members, mayors, militants, and friends of the new political movement were assassinated, sometimes one every other day. The list of homicides disappeared. Injured and exiled persons from the party registers near 5,000 victims. The case is before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights as a case of political genocide, inaugurating a new kind of genocide, in this case for political reasons. This past experience worries many friends of peace, and the negotiators are afraid of a repetition. The current government assures that they will take measures to avoid a repetition, but this is something we should watch carefully. To end on a positive note, I should say that in 1991, there was a Constitutional Assembly elected to draft a more modern constitution replacing the one from 1886. There were 4 representatives of the mobilized guerrillas from the M19 guerrilla who participated in the drafting of the new constitution. Some of the achievements were freedom of religion, because in the 1886 constitution, the official religion of the country was Catholic. So there were many Colombians who were left out from participating in many things. The creation of a tutela, which is a mechanism for any citizen to claim immediate protection for his or her fundamental rights. The creation of the Office of Attorney General. The creation of a constitutional court. Before, there was a constitutional group in the Supreme Court, but with the evolution of constitutional law, the United Nations advises countries to have a court specifically focused only on constitution, to keep the constitution. And this constitutional court has been applied in many ways. For example, last week they passed a resolution by which is forbidden to do mining in Paramos, which is the high mountains that produce water. And they have made many decisions that are great, and there is no time to mention. Creation of an ombudsman's office for human rights, and creation of a state of emergency, declare a state of emergency in case of need. Participatory democracy, the people have more ways to participate, organizing petitions and other forms of participating in politics. And approve the foundation of more political parties. Another positive development is the activity of many NGOs and grassroots organizations that challenge repression and offer hope for the future. That is sort of my introduction.
Thank you, Cecilia.
You want this?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's a pleasure to be talking this morning with my dear friends from Colombia Support Network. A little bit of background that why we decided to organize this panel. On December 15, the Colombian government and the FARC signed the biggest agreement, one of the most important agreements in the peace process that for most of us that have been kind of skeptical about the peace process, it was a moment to realize that this process was different, that something might come out of this. So it was kind of a time to pay attention to the process and start studying seriously the documents that have been, the draft agreements that have been agreed so far. So with people at the Colombia Support Network, we have been studying, analyzing, discussing those agreements, and we decided that we could offer a talk also for us to study more seriously that process. So, so we are talking more from not from an academic background or approach, but more as a human rights activist. So. I will focus my presentation on 3 main topics. The victims, that I think is very important to know what has happened, what have been the tragic outcomes of the Colombian armed conflict. The precedent in terms of the latest the mobilization of an armed group with the paramilitary groups that they mobilized between 2002 and 2006, and the current peace process with the FARC EP, with a little more focus on the Agrarian Reform Agreement and the Victims Agreement. Okay, here we have the total number of victims that has been, the Colombia armed conflict has produced over time in the last 50 years. So we can see it's a huge, extremely high number of victims, 8.4 million. And if we group in periods of 5 years, we can see that between 2000 and 2004 was the worst part of the conflict that produced more victims, followed by 2005 and 2009. Things have improved a little bit, but it's still a very difficult situation. So, but the conflict in Colombia has many particularities, and one of them is that it has affected some areas of the country most than others. So those are taking into account the percentage of population that has been affected. Basically, the periphery, departments of Guaviare, Chocó, Putumayo, Caquetá, and Arauca has been the most affected. More than half of the population have been victims, and with levels as amazing, like Guaviare with 88% or Chocó with almost 84% of the total population that has been victimized by the armed conflict. So in this, if we kind of break down the information about victims, we find that there are people that have been direct victims in that account, and other indirect victims that basically are kind of family members, close family members of some of those victims of homicide, forced disappearance, and kidnapping. So if we look at the type of crime that has caused most direct victims, we can see that forced displacement has been the 88.5% of the victims has been forcibly displaced. So Colombia is one of the worst countries in the world in terms of forced displacement. Threats is the second, homicide, and other crimes. Something to clarify: this information has been collected by a state agency that was created several years ago, the Victims Unit, and we should consider those numbers with a little caution, because there are crimes that, if the peace process can succeed, we probably will learn that a lot of forced disappearance people or homicides will increase, and other crimes. So again, the forced displacement, the most, and it followed the same pattern that we saw in the previous graphic of the worst year between 2000 and 2009. The peace and justice jurisdiction, or the process with the paramilitary groups. So as I mentioned before, between 2003 and 2006, this big umbrella paramilitary organization, Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia, AUC, they mobilized, and those are the numbers. It's an amazing number of combatants that they mobilized on those years, 31,000. And they did that mobilization in a period of 4 years. So that was a process. The mobilization of the paramilitaries was allowed in part because the government of President Uribe, who was very close to the paramilitary groups, basically create the legal framework to do that under a new international environment where human rights issues have been moved to the given them a lot of importance, They created this jurisdiction that at the beginning it was very lenient against paramilitary groups, but after a ruling from the Constitutional Court, it made several improvements in the process. So most of the paramilitary that they mobilized, basically the soldiers of the paramilitary groups, they were not processed. They were they were sent home, and the jurisdiction has focused kind of on the main leaders and middle commanders. Basically 3,666 paramilitary has been proposed to go through this jurisdiction. And as a result of that and of the confessions, the Fiscalia or Attorney General Office has issued orders for more than 50,000 orders to investigate complicity of several members, like politicians, members of the armed force, and civilians, and even international multinational corporations like Chiquita Brands that has recognized that they gave 1.7 million to the AUC. So one of the difficulties with this peace and justice jurisdiction is first of all, the judicial system was flooded with cases. The system was not prepared to take that high number of people that went through the system, and everything was new. So far, if we look at the sentence, and here let me explain. The first two columns are first rulings. First ruling of the four tribunals that were set for to judge paramilitaries have issued only 36 sentences and first ruling, and on appeal 23. But also for those paramilitaries that do not confess, do not collaborate with the system, they could be excluded, and those who are excluded go through the regular criminal justice system. So there have been 67 rulings excluding people, and because those decisions also have appeal, so there have been 6 decisions on appeal on those. So in total, in first ruling has been 103 rulings and 29 on regarding regarding appeals. The number could be a little misleading. The numbers could be a little misleading because it doesn't mean necessarily that each person is a case. Many judges have decided to group a lot of people, and so those sentences, 36 sentences, for instance, in first ruling sentences doesn't mean 36 people, but could include a couple thousand people. So one something that is in the base of the system is the confessions. So confessions of crimes of those demobilized paramilitaries. So as of June 2015, the latest data available from the Attorney General Office showed that 57,000 crimes have been confessed by the paramilitary groups. That include a total of 84,000 victims. Again, the paramilitaries are not necessarily confessing all their crimes, but even the few ones they have confessed show those amazing numbers. The main crimes confessed by paramilitary has been homicides, 40,000, and other crimes. So, because of those confessions on homicide, one of the main activities that the Attorney General Office has been doing the last several years has been looking for mass graves all over the country. So those are data as of end of January of mass grave exhumations. And so far 6,532 human remains have been found, and 3,000 identified and returned to their families. and sometimes in ceremonies look like this. Actually, this was had been a progress over the original process where the Fiscalia was not prepared